The Venezuelan opposition says it's now in direct communication with the US military after self-declared President Juan Guaido failed to topple President Nicolas Maduro in an uprising last month. So, is the US about to go to war in Venezuela? I'll ask Guaido's representative to the UK, Vanessa Neumann. Vanessa Neumann, thank you for joining me on UpFront. It's been nearly 4 months since your boss, opposition politician Juan Guaido, declared himself the interim president of Venezuela, citing Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution as his justification. But that article, Vanessa, lays out 6 criteria which make a president unavailable: death, resignation, removal by the judiciary, a permanent disability, abandonment of the office, or recall by popular vote. None of those 6 criteria apply in the case of Nicolas Maduro, which means Maduro, for all his many sins and flaws, is still the president of Venezuela and Juan Guaido isn't.
First of all, of course, I consider him my interim president, and so do millions of Venezuelans. The position was considered vacant because there was no president, because there was no election that was credible, and that is foreseen, actually. It is foreseen in the Constitution. If no actual president is there to take office, the office is vacant, and therefore it automatically goes to the president of the National Assembly.
You say there's no president because there were no elections. Obviously, Nicolas Maduro says he won an election last year overwhelmingly. You say it was a flawed election, and yet it was the opposition that not only boycotted last year's presidential elections, you insisted the UN not send any observers to monitor them. So when you say they were flawed elections or a sham, it's hard to know, isn't it? Because you didn't allow the UN to come in and monitor them and say they were a sham.
First of all, none of the conditions were met for free and fair elections. The major leaders of all the major political parties were imprisoned or inhabilitated. We had no, our media was blocked, internet was blocked, there had no resources. Every aspect of doing support for anybody other than Nicolas Maduro was blocked. So there was just no conditions that had been.
But wouldn't it have been better if you had agreed with Maduro and allowed the UN in to support your case? You shot yourselves in the foot.
No, we did not shoot ourselves in the foot, because the UN, they would then pick which countries and which delegations, and everybody had agreed, and it has in fact been a condition also of the Lima Group, for instance, that without the freedom of the political prisoners and the leaders of the parties, there is no proper election, period. It was rigged from the start. Not only that, the president of the Smartmatic, who runs the machines that run the elections, fled the country and then gave a statement in London that the elections were hacked and they were completely faked.
Although, of course, the former Spanish Prime Minister, Mr. Zapatero, said he didn't have any doubt about the voting process. He was there as an election observer. The former president of Ecuador said they were developing normally. Look, we can argue about the legitimacy of elections. We can argue about Article 233. What we can't argue about is the facts on the ground. Juan Guaido may have declared himself interim president, but Maduro still has the keys to the presidential palace. He still controls the armed forces. He still has the loyalty of the top generals. He still controls the country's key financial institutions. Regime change is harder than it looks, isn't it, Vanessa?
I think you mean a transition to democracy and a return of prosperity to the country is harder than it looks. Yes, it certainly is, because the military is earning $8.8 billion a year in illicit trade and the trafficking of narcotics, the trafficking of gold, diesel, even food, even the very food that people are eating because they have demolished the production economy. That is also being used to fund the regime and to exert social control. So it is no surprise that they have not rebelled, because basically... Hold on.
You're saying it's no surprise. You can't say it's no surprise when on April 30th, Juan Guaido and his supporters marched towards the presidential palace. Military leaders were supposed to join him. That was the plan, but it was a complete failure. I mean, if he knew they weren't going to support him, if it's no surprise that the military aren't on board because they're all corrupt, why do this uprising? Why march to the palace and expect generals to join you? I don't get it.
Well, they had said that they would. They had said that they would. There had been negotiations, and that they had said that that they would join along, and that was actually going to be certified by Michael Moreno, who's the head of the Supreme Court, was going to support the National Assembly, the legitimate National Assembly, and say that they should be followed, and then Padrino Lopez would follow suit. So that unfortunately did not happen because for a number of reasons.
And it didn't happen because of mistakes that you guys made. Juan Guaido says we have recognized our mistakes, what we didn't do, and what we did too much of. What exactly is he referring to, though? Which specific mistakes is he owning up to?
I have to say, I can't really speak for my president, my boss, specifically on what he
Aren't
had
you
in
his
mind
quote-unquote new ambassador to the UK? I know the Venezuelan government doesn't consider you to be the ambassador, but aren't you his ambassador to the UK in his
That's okay.
his world?
That's okay. They don't have to consider me ambassador. I don't consider them a government. So
no, fair enough. But when I've interviewed their representatives, they defend their president. I'm just wondering why you won't tell me why he said that.
I do defend my president.
So which mistakes did he make?
What mistakes did he make? I think I think the mistake was trusting that these men would keep their word, that they had agreed that they would join us, and all of their talk of, oh yes, we'll come and support the Constitution and defend the people, turned out to be untrue.
Juan Guaido said in a Washington Post op-ed recently that Venezuela is not your typical dictatorship. But Vanessa, Maduro's supporters would say, how is it a dictatorship if Guaido is able to walk around Caracas freely, do interviews with foreign media, hold big public rallies, even call for the Venezuelan military to turn on Maduro? I can't imagine the Chinese or the Saudis or the Iranians or the North Koreans allowing an opposition politician to do that in their capital city.
Well, Guaido, of course, his location is never really known. I mean, he comes out in public, but basically lives underground. In other words, an unspecified location.
Well, he wasn't underground when he was walking towards the presidential palace, though, was he, on April the 30th?
Okay, but they have since eliminated or indicted or sought the arrest of 28% of the National Assembly. They are going after the National Assembly piece by piece. We have no proof of life from Juan Guaido's deputy. No proof of life, okay? They just arrested him, and forget about, a phone call to your lawyer. And almost everybody there has had to flee the country and can't go back because of the dictator's repression. The only thing that is protecting
Vanessa, I'm not disputing the human
rights.
rights abuses. I'm not disputing the human rights abuses. I'm asking, if I'm Maduro and I'm a dictator, why am I allowing this man to run around asking my defense minister and generals to turn on me? Why don't I just lock him up?
Well, because locking him up would make him a martyr, and you'd also incur the ire of the nearly 60 countries that are supporting him, that have said that he's a legitimate president. That's a huge international coalition to annoy, and that would, of course, result in who knows what actions, who knows what further sanctions or what actions by the international community, and would make him a martyr to all those millions of people you see coming out in march in support. You see the people come out and weep with joy at the sight of Guaido. And those people would rise up if their president is thrown in prison. So that's the risk calculus that Maduro has taken.
Fair point. You mentioned millions of people come out on the streets, but you don't deny, do you, that Maduro still has the support of millions of Venezuelans?
I would dispute the millions. Well, perhaps.
Well, there's 30 million people in Venezuela. Are you telling me that he has support of less than a million people?
No. Fair
you tell
point.
me how much support he has.
Well, we estimate that the support varies between 10 and 15%. It does not go beyond 15% of the population. You have to calculate that a lot of that is because the only money and the only food they receive is from the regime. So if you had a free and fair and democratic system, would probably be a lot lower. However, let me be clear. The transition to democracy that is being contemplated would include people who are from the PSUV party, which is the ruling party of Maduro. So our issue is not with people who may have had some reason to support Chavez or are still getting their food benefits or the welfare from Maduro. Our dispute is that this is a dictatorship, and if they want to vote in free and fair elections, for their party, that can happen. That is foreseen. That is what is being discussed.
So the Maduro government has said for a while now that this whole crisis, all of your opposition, is part of a foreign plot. It's a US-led Yankee imperialist attempt at regime change. And you guys seem to want to prove him right. Juan Guaido said last week that a red line on US intervention has been crossed, and he's opened, quote, direct communications with the US military's Southern Command. So Maduro's correct, is he not, when he says that the opposition wants a US military intervention?
Well, he has sent it. It's public information. I mean, he put it on Twitter that he has sent his ambassador to Washington, D.C. to go down to meet with Southcom, and the meeting has been requested. I think the sense is that, under that article, you can seek cooperation in defense of your people and your territory, especially when your military is defending neither. Venezuela has a number of issues. It is completely invaded. We had Russians fly in with military aircraft. They don't belong there. And then we also, not only do you have the Cuban intelligence officers, we also have a foreign terrorist organization, the ELN, which staged cross-border terrorist attacks on our ally, Colombia, and is intimidating Venezuelan people from exercising their rights.
So given all those things you've listed to me, you would like to see a US military intervention in response?
It is not my decision. That is the president's decision.
What would he like to see? You're his representative.
Well, if he has called that he thinks that that's necessary, then that would be what his decision to make.
How can you believe that a US military intervention will bring democracy or freedom or human rights to Venezuela, especially with people like Elliott Abrams and John Bolton leading the charge, especially given the abysmal history of US interventions in your part of the world, Guatemala, Chile, Argentina, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador? Why on earth would you trust the US military, let alone Donald Trump?
Oh, well, first of all, times have changed. And I think even anybody who has been involved in Latin America since the 1970s, I think, A, the continent has changed. B, the attitude of the United States to the region has changed. C, the understanding of counterinsurgency or counterterrorist or operations or things to secure, safeguard a vulnerable population. All of those parameters and all of those understandings and methodologies have changed.
You say times have changed, attitudes have changed, and yet the person leading the US position on Venezuela is Elliott Abrams, a man who was deeply involved in war crimes and human rights abuses in Central America during the 80s. You have John Bolton, who said recently, the Monroe Doctrine is alive and well. It's our hemisphere, he said in reference to Latin America. And of course, you have Donald Trump saying Venezuela has all that oil and they're right on our back door. Doesn't seem to have changed at all. They seem to be interested in oil and sending people with a very bad record on human rights to help you.
Hey, I was too young to live through the incidents that.
Well, I'm younger than you, but we've all read history. Elliott Abrams was responsible for massive war crimes in El Salvador and elsewhere in the 1980s. He's now the man you trust to bring democracy to Venezuela. Seriously?
We just need to have the humanitarian aid enter, and we need to get foreign terrorist organizations out from terrorizing our own people. And we welcome the help of whoever would like to help us get back into democracy. Hopefully, our hope has always been, and our position has always been, and continues to be, that a peaceful solution is preferred.
But let me ask you this. We're almost out of time. One last question. Juan Guaido has said he'll step down once elections take place in Venezuela, if Maduro leaves office, of course. And you've said that you personally might consider running for president of Venezuela yourself. You said, quote, I may well throw my hat into the ring. Why not? What makes you qualified to be president of a divided, crisis-ridden country of 30 million people?
I'm not running. I have plenty of work to do.
You said in February you're thinking about it. You changed your mind?
No, that was. I think I was asked that on a program whether I would, and perhaps in some future I would. But at the moment, my concern is saving the lives of my compatriots and getting my country back to democracy. So I think that's plenty of work for me for now.
Vanessa Neumann, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me on UpFront. Despite the arrest and prosecution of legendary drug kingpin El Chapo, the drug trafficking business remains as profitable and deadly as ever. So, who is winning the so-called war on drugs? UpFront producer Ryan Coles has this week's reality check.
Billionaire drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman brought more drugs into the U.S. than any other person in history. Today, he's facing life behind bars in the United States, and authorities are thrilled.
This conviction is a victory for the American people.
So, with the kingpin out of the game, drug trafficking and violence must be way down, right? Nope. Despite his arrest 3 years ago, El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel continues to profit from massive drug shipments to the U.S. On the day of his conviction, officials seized the largest load of fentanyl ever found in the U.S. at a Sinaloa-controlled border crossing. And El Chapo's arrest could actually end more lives than it saves. His absence has triggered a Game of Thrones-style bloodbath between members of his own cartel and former competitors. The fact is, power struggles between cartels means there's going to be more bloodshed. In Sinaloa, El Chapo's former stronghold, homicides in 2017 soared 39%. And what keeps this infernal cycle going? Demand. Worldwide, the number of drug users increased by 31% between 2009 and 2016. In the US, opioid consumption is on the rise, so it's no surprise that heroin production in Mexico, America's largest supplier, has reached record levels. Right now, the only victors in the so-called war on drugs are those profiting from addiction. So, is it time to set the bullets and handcuffs aside? Take a look at the Portuguese model. Changing attitudes towards drug abuse in clinics and society at large helped push the country to decriminalize drug use and possession in 2001. Since then, they've seen impressive declines in harmful drug use, overdoses, and drug-related crime. When the policy began, 100,000 Portuguese used heroin. Today, the estimated number of high-risk opioid users is 33,000. While drug use still poses a significant challenge, it no longer threatens law and order in Portugal. So, is filling our prisons with El Chapos really the best solution? With mounting evidence to the contrary, maybe it's time to bring drugs out of the gunsmoke and into the light.
Known for tweeting sarcastic and stinging critiques of unelected Arab rulers, Palestinian pro-democracy activist Iyad al-Baghdadi rose to prominence in 2011 during the Arab Spring. In April, officials in Norway, where he's currently living under asylum, placed him in protective custody. Why? They received a shocking warning from the CIA of a possible threat to his life from the Saudi government. El-Baghdadi is a vocal critic of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and had been working with the late journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who of course was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last October. So, does the Saudi government now have a policy of just assassinating its critics abroad? And if so, what can be done to stop them? Iyad al-Baghdadi joins me now from Oslo. Iyad, thanks for joining me on UpFront. Why you, Iyad? There are a lot of people around the world, Arab and non-Arab, Muslim and non-Muslim, who criticize, attack, oppose the Saudi Crown Prince. Why this alleged targeting of you specifically by him, do you think?
It's not just mere criticism that causes something like this. Of course, I am a critic of Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS. I think this is about more than criticism. This is about actual projects that I was involved in that I think were highly sensitive and seem to have hit a nerve with MBS.
Are you able to speak about any of those projects yet?
I mean, we did a risk assessment with a number of security experts, and we came up with 6 or 7 items. And as you can imagine, I cannot speak about all of them, but I could mention that 2 of them were initiatives that started in the life of the late Jamal Khashoggi, which and it fell up. I mean, after his death, it fell upon me. Kind of like the projects basically escalated after his death, and it was my team who followed up and took them to another level.
These are projects to do with democracy in the Middle East, transparency in the Middle East, media freedom?
Well, specifically, so Jamal was very concerned about the health of the Arab public sphere, and he realized that the Arab public sphere, in a certain way, shifted from being conventional media to being social media. So he understood the role of Twitter. Twitter was very important in the post-2011 years. It was specifically important in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia had a very big online population. So he was focused really on this, this conquest of Twitter, starting with 2015 or 2016 with the rise of Mohammed bin Salman and his right-hand man Saud al-Qahtani, and the whole shady characters around them, going all the way, really crossing over into the United States with Jared Kushner, etc. So he was very concerned about the health of that, and he himself was a very important Twitter influencer in the Arabic language. So both of these initiatives actually had to do with restoring Twitter's neutrality.
And are you going to change your behavior on Twitter now, given that you now know or suspect that it's your work on Twitter that has attracted the Saudi government's attention, the Saudi trolls who spend a lot of time on Twitter? I mean, I first came across you several years ago on Twitter. You have a big presence there. Are you now going to change your behavior on Twitter in reaction to these threats?
Well, you might have noticed, Mehdi, that I mostly stick to the English language on Twitter. I mean, I do once in a while tweet in Arabic, but it's rather rare. And the reason was really, it was a form of self-censorship. It was me basically knowing that they are far more aggressive, because see, they wanted to control the Arabic language public sphere, and that was, so they needed to control Arabic Twitter, Arabic language Twitter. So had I spoken primarily in Arabic, they would have been so much more aggressive against me, and so it was a form of protection. Right now with these events, what's happening is that I'm crossing over into Arabic, and I might actually have to start speaking in Arabic more because I have a bigger audience, and I feel like I have a responsibility towards them. But at the same time,
I guess your self-censorship didn't really help in a sense, because you still got targeted by them.
Well, I mean, it's not surprising at the least that MBS would go after dissidents. I mean, there are people who got far worse fates than I did. I mean,
do you find it odd, Iyad, that one arm of the U.S. government, the CIA, is warning you via the Norwegians and others, warning others that the Saudis are trying to murder you, while another arm of the U.S. government, the State Department or the White House or the Pentagon, continues to cozy up to those same Saudis? Isn't that kind of weird?
The conundrum over here is that Saudi Arabia, whether we have MBS or not, Saudi Arabia continues to be an important country and an important strategic ally to the United States. MBS knows that very well, and he knows that this is something that he can use. So I mean, it is weird that the CIA is basically living up to its legal duty, its duty to warn. But then again, I mean, the only reason why MBS is unaccountable and unhinged is because the one administration in the world that are most capable of reining him in are currently his biggest enablers.
And it's not just the Saudis, of course. You have this shadowy Israeli security firm, the NSO Group, which we've just discovered recently was behind the spyware used to hack into WhatsApp, and which also sold spyware to the Saudis, which was allegedly used to spy on the late Jamal Khashoggi.
Absolutely, and I mean, this relationship, I think it's really good that more light is being shed on it. I should also add that one of the most sensitive investigations that I was involved in, and in fact that was, I think, the most immediate reason I think the threats escalated, was my involvement with the Jeff Bezos hack, and NSO also happened to be the prime suspects with, when it comes to that.
Yeah, you did a lot of reporting around the alleged blackmailing of Amazon boss Jeff Bezos. Let me ask you this. Does it depress you that MBS has not only gotten away with allegedly killing Jamal Khashoggi, the CIA believe with high confidence that he was behind it, but more than 7 months later, he's still able to threaten people like yourself, the Saudi dissident Omar Abdulaziz in Canada, another person in the US who's asked to remain anonymous, the three of you who have been identified as being threatened by the Saudis, as far afield as Norway, Canada, the US, he still has that power.
Yeah, and it makes sense if you think about it. I mean, it actually mirrors the logic of targeting Jeff Bezos, by the way. I mean, I mentioned last week that one of the most painful messages that I received after these events came from a human rights activist who lived within the Arab world, and he sent me a message saying, what does this mean for us? If you live in Norway, which is supposed to be one of the safest countries in the world, and you are threatened, what chance do I have if I live in Lebanon, or I live in Tunisia, or I live in Egypt, or I live in Jordan, or wherever?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a logic. I mean, if you can target someone in Norway, if you can try to blackmail the richest man on the planet, then who's safe?
One final question, Iyad. This isn't the first time your life has been threatened. In 2016, I believe, ISIL added you to a kill list and urged lone wolves to take action against you. In 2017, you received a second warning from the group telling you, quote, "We're watching you." Despite all these dangers to your life from multiple actors, you continue to do what you do. You're here on this show speaking out. Why?
I wouldn't be myself if I don't, Mahdi. I mean, this is an intergenerational struggle. The idea of stopping, the idea of giving up is simply unimaginable.
Iyad, thank you for joining me on UpFront. Be safe.
Thank you so much.
That's our show. UpFront will be back next week.